I have an idea if we can float it a little bit here. Maybe we could start a conversation that isn't exactly right on the learning objectives, but which may be of interest to everyone. And that might have to do with asking Dan a little bit about some of his recent publications. I'm not going to ask him to, read to us, but Dan, I wonder if you could tell us about what you have published recently or what we might be looking forward to seeing soon.
Oh, well, sure. Karen, I guess the most recent is, now that you mentioned, it just happened to have here, Karen.
You just happen to have a copy of it?
Oh my goodness, what's it doing here? Yeah, there it is.
A little book of attachment.
The little book of attachment is called, and I'm real happy with it. We were asked to write a little book of attachment, and it's interesting. The application is for all professionals, rather than just people who specialize in working with kids with reactive attachment disorder or even traumatized children, but just anybody in child mental health.
Okay, great. That sounds like it's very relevant to today's audience.
I hope so. And the reason we decided to write it, well, because we were asked to, first of all, we were asked to write it. So we said, of course, how can you turn down a request like that? But as we were writing it, we got more and more excited about it, because if you want to spend the next few years of your life reading all the articles on attachment, you'll probably find 30,000 of them. And to look at the, if we want to summarize them we want to analyze the factors of attachment. Mm-hmm. They come up with three major clumps that if you're securely attached as a child, it's going to influence three major areas of your development. The first being, you're going to be pretty good at having reciprocal relationships. That's going to be a talent of yours. And so probably throughout life, the odds that you'll be able to have satisfying, meaningful, enjoyable relationships with other people, both partners and best friends and casual acquaintances and neighbors and anybody, is much better if you're securely attached, if you have that classification. Secondly, is that if you're securely attached, you tend to be much better at regulating your emotional states. So anger doesn't become rage, sadness is not despair, fear is not terror. Your regulation skills are much better. And the third thing we found is that if you're securely attached, you can reflect much better. Reflect on your inner life. So a lot of kids, America has a sort of a bad habit, I consider it to be, when a kid is sort of acting out, they're behaving in a way that's causing troubles. People sort of, I think, sometimes shame them by saying, use your words. And I call it shaming them because the kids often don't have words.
Right.
They may have memorized some words. They may have been given words 87 times, but words do not emerge from their inner life to give expression to what their experience is. They just don't make that connection. Securely attached kids are much better at making that connection between words and in the actual experience. So given those three major areas, we talked about many things and many interventions from our perspective that will facilitate the development of those three major areas based on attachment principles. And my co-author is Ben Gurney-Smith, kind of fancy name, I think. I tease him a bit about it. Gurney-Smith, really? Benjamin Gurney-Smith. Now, what does that mean? It means he's English. It means his last job was in Cambridge. So that's what it means. Anyway, I tease him about it. And well, as luck would have it, his fourth child was being born while we were writing the book. So he was able to get excited about something he was seeing in his fourth child and make it more practical then. So I thought that was cute.
Oh, great.
I think I missed the name, Dan. Can you tell it to me again so that the name of the book, so that I can put that in the chat for everyone else?
I certainly can, Nancy. Thanks for asking. It's called The Little Book of Attachment. Sort of like the little engine that could.
Is there a subtitle?
Well, that's a good question. Let me see.
Who's going to check?
Yes. Theory to Practice in Child Mental Health with Dyadic Developmental Psychotherapy.
Excellent. Wow.
Yeah.
So I love that idea that you're putting something out there, and you've done this before. You've talked about attachment-focused parenting, where the issue wasn't just attachment disorders necessarily, but in this case, you're really addressing any kind of attachment struggle that isn't secure, and
For
that's
sure.
so many of our children in just everyday life, schools, all kinds of settings.
Yes. Yeah, that's what the emphasis is on. It's not the diagnosis of reactive attachment disorder or something like that. It's about attachment is sort of a key principle in human development. It's not the only way we relate to other people, but it's a central way. Especially, it's more important the more intimate we get in relationships. Our smaller circle, the circle closest around us, that's where attachment skills that you're learning, original parent-infant relationship, just flower.
Yeah.
And those close relationships we have throughout life with all sorts of people.
Yeah. So in the book, do you spend some time talking about the different kinds of attachment that are not necessarily an attachment disorder?
I'd have to go back and look.
Yeah. I just wondered if there
I'm
was
sorry.
discussion, and I think it might be useful for our audience just to kind of remind themselves of the different kinds of attachments that kids can have sometimes. And one of them that we really hope for is the secure attachment. But many children have what we would consider an ambivalent attachment or an anxious attachment. In adult language, we talk about a preoccupied attachment. There are a lot of different terms that people may have heard, and they may not completely understand what they mean.
Yeah, we actually did talk about that now that you mention it, Karen. The anxious or the anxious, ambivalent, and the avoidant kid, the kid who, see, attachment really, some people even call it a system that teaches human beings how to regulate, a regulatory system of the brain. And attachment is the best way to make it happen. That might be a bit debatable, but regardless, it is a very important regulatory system about stress, which makes attachment relevant for trauma. Trauma really is a lack of safety. Attachment is to generate safety. That's its function. Human beings need attachment relationships to be safe. Babies clearly do. But if you ask anybody, well, not anybody, but if I ask many people, including myself, what was your first thought on 911? My first thought was, I want to be home. Yeah. I was 200 miles away and I wanted to be home. That's my first thought. It's a sort of a basic thing for safety, is be close to people that we trust, that we're really close with. And attachment is about that. So to regulate stress. And so for safety. Well, some kids, when parents aren't available, say a mom after giving birth is very depressed, and she wants to, but she just can't be available to her child. The child sometimes then develops a habit of relying on self too much for safety. So the child may try to downregulate intense stress because mom isn't there to help to regulate the intense. So they sort of detach then, and they reduce the importance of emotion in their life. And they also tend to reduce the importance of relationships in their life. And they become what's the classification is called avoidance. Then other kids, their parents might be there sometimes and not other times, sometimes not other, for all kinds of reasons. And those kids become ambivalent and anxious because they know when a parent's there, that helps. So then they start clinging to parents. They want parents there all the time because they don't want them to go away. and then they're too hypervigilant about whether or not their parents are, and then they sort of start to whine and be clingy and not happy because doesn't work as well.
Yeah.
And then the third classification, well, there are four actually, but just staying with that. So one kids are too reliant on people to deal with stress. The other kids are not relying enough on people to deal with distress. The third classification, they don't rely on people and they don't rely on themselves. That's called disorganized attachment classification. That's the classification that mental health people have to be most concerned about, because the great majority of attachment problems are in that classification. Because they don't know what to deal with stress. They can't rely on self. They can't rely on others.
Right, and that they're the ones that can have a very confused looking sense of attachment. I remember as a play therapist, sometimes I'd have a child come into my office, and the very first time they ever met me, they'd be jumping straight into my lap, and they would throw their coat on their grandmother.
Right.
Piece of furniture, and that was usually a first clue that there might be a little organization in the attachment.
Can I interrupt? Can I interrupt? I just want to be sure that because we have some questions coming in through the Q&A, and some people in the audience have been concerned if they were late or not. I want to say that we have not officially started the webinar yet. We decided to have a conversation with Dan before everything kind of got started, because something happened where emails went out that some emails said 2 o'clock, some emails said 2:30. That seems to be that there was faux pas on our part. So I think a lot of people are coming in at 2:30 instead of the 2 o'clock start time that we had envisioned having. So I will just brief in a few minutes have a formal introduction for Dr. Hughes and all of our panelists, and we will begin a little late, but we didn't want to just sort of sit around and be quiet and kind of wonder what was going on. So Dr. Ross or Morris decided to start a brief conversation with Dan, just so we could, since we are recording, we are just having a brief conversation before the actual formal webinar starts. So thank you all for your patience, and we will be getting started formally in a few minutes.
Thank you, Jamal. Just to be sure, I want to finish the last bit of because there are four classifications. In the three we talked about so far, two are organized. I have a pattern. The pattern is rely on myself. Too much, I do okay, but I still struggle. I rely too much on other people. That's better than not having a pattern. And then you have the disorganized where there's no pattern. So stress tends to really knock them off balance. And as you say, it can make them indiscriminate. They can go to strangers then. That's not a wise thing to do for stress, but many of the kids do. Other kids are extremely controlling. They want to control everything in the universe. What they love to control is their caregiver's emotional state in a negative way. Or they become extremely impulsive in maybe in a stereotypical way, then a very perseverative way. And those kids have a hard time because stress is just too much for them, and they just fall apart. Well, those are the kids who end up having the mental health problems that we're most concerned about. But the fourth classification are the securely attached kids. And the beauty of that is they can rely on themselves reasonably well. They can rely on other people, and they know the difference. They know when they have to rely on other people, when it's better to rely on themselves, when they can rely on other people, and they can go back and forth. So they really are in good shape to deal with stresses that come up in their life. And when you have that, that's a protective factor against mental illness. It truly is. That's a very great trait to have, to be able to handle all those stress. And it may actually prevent a very stressful situation from becoming a psychological trauma.
That brings up another really interesting question to me. And I know that you've done some writing with Jonathan Balin. But did I say his name right? I think I did.
Yeah, John Balin, yep.
Balin, yeah. It's so interesting, like this idea of secure attachment. We know that the environment and genetics play into these things. And sometimes when we talk about resiliency, there's this confusion that resiliency is a character trait. But what we're starting to learn is that it's also about the environment that a person is in. And so how much of secure attachment has to do with parenting and relationships, and how much has to do, are there some kids that seem genetically prone to develop a secure attachment or an insecure attachment? Is there, what do we know about that? I don't know if you can comment on that today, but I'm curious.
Well, I don't know that much about it other than what John tells me. And I don't know if John knows that much about it but I think the consensus is it's much more of an environmental, because attachment at heart is a relationship between two people. Mm-hmm. You have a pattern in how you relate to people, but even that, it can change with another person, depending on the person you're with. But in general, we have a pattern, and that pattern is developed in our relationship with our caregivers. Yeah. And so that's the key thing. There probably is some sort of genetic tendency to be more vulnerable, like to developing attachment disorganization pattern. There's some suggestion of that. Could be a bit of a genetic tendency, but even that, probably most people would say is primarily that even that tendency may have been triggered environmentally. So it's an epigenetic factor. Yeah. Caused by an environmental stress that caused us to move in that direction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in just a few minutes, we're going to get to start formally. But you know, you're making an important point, I think, which might be worth some discussion even from our panelists. This idea, I think you're saying that secure attachment really can account for a lot of resiliency.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, that it's not. Yeah. Not that we can't teach kids any resiliency type skills. I don't want to say that we can't do that, but that one of the best ways to have a child be resilient is to really work on that secure attachment.
For sure, definitely. Years ago, this may be before the time of some of our panelists, because there's some young people in the group here. Karen, well, not that you're not young, you're young too. You're not quite as young as everybody in the group. I'm sort of the oldest one in the group. Well, anyway, years ago when Ronald Reagan was governor of California, Ronald came up with the theory of saving money, taxpayer money, as he was wont to do. And he says, I've discovered, as if Ronald was doing the research, I've discovered this psychological notion of resiliency and explains so many things. And what I've realized is that resilient children do not need special services because they're resilient. And non-resilient children cannot benefit from special services. Therefore, let's get rid of special services because of resiliency.
Oh my.
They actually said that at the California legislature to try to reduce funding for special services. And Alan Schroff, psychologist, University of Minnesota, made him crazy. He was really not happy about that. So Alan went back into his files, because Alan at the time, well, he finished his career. He had a career based on studying one group of people, lots of people from pre-birth until in their 50s. So this was going on like for 50 years. So he went back and studied all these people, looked at all his data that he accumulated to find out who are the resilient ones and who are the not resilient ones. Basically, they had a hard start in life. Now they're doing great as adults. They're called resilient. Versus the hard start in life and they're not doing good as adults, so they're not resilient. That was a simple definition. And then he went to all the data to separate, it's a correlational study, but it's what he had. So to study the resilient versus non-resilient, and all these measures of psychological tests, all these demographics, nothing, nada, except one thing. The resilient ones had one adult in their life when they were children who made a difference. And that one adult could be a teacher, or it might be a coach, or a minister, or the parent of a friend, but somebody that was identified as the person, an adult they would go to when they were in stress. Isn't that lovely?
It is so lovely. And that research has been so important. It's
Yeah.
that you hear about in many different areas of psychology. Yeah.
Yes. The need for an adult, for a child to have an adult who's their person. Sometimes parents are just not able to do it for a million reasons. And sometimes that really has to be somebody else, but that person can make a difference. But it can't be a one-off thing. It can't be somebody who says hi for 10 minutes. It has to be an ongoing relationship.
All right. With that, I think we're going to officially get things kicked off here. I want to welcome everyone to Building Trust with Children Who Have Been Hurt in Relationships, provided by the PA Care Partnership in association with the Office of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. If you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A feature, which you will find by running your mouse along the bottom of the Zoom screen. Information will be available at the end of today's presentation for those seeking continuing education credits for this webinar or a certificate of attendance. This information is also available in the email you received from us today. And I would like to apologize for everyone who has just come in to the room. We seem to have had some mix up and a faux pas on our part, where this webinar was supposed to begin at 2 o'clock. But some of the email information that went out said 2:30, and that's we would like to apologize for that. So we were just having before just now, we were just having a casual conversation with Dr. Hughes because we just didn't want to just sit here for a half hour before we started the presentation in silence. So if you are interested in hearing what that conversation was about, we have been recording the whole time since we began at 2 o'clock, and that recording will be available on our website in a few days. And with that, I would like to introduce our panelists. Today, we have our moderator, Karen Rosser Morris, a consulting clinical psychologist and trauma-informed care specialist with the Department of Human Services, specifically the Office of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. We have Dr. Dana Malakovic, who is the mental health AOD specialist with the Office of Safe Schools, and she's also a statewide advisor for trauma-informed practices. We have Brandy Fox, who is the director of cross-sector infant early childhood mental health initiatives with the Pennsylvania Key. And we have Nancy Massey and myself will be monitoring the chat and the Q&A.
I would like to tell you all a story. When I sent out the first promotion that Dr. Daniel Hughes was going to be speaking for us, I immediately received an email from this woman who said to me, "The Daniel Hughes? Is it the Daniel Hughes?" And that just gave me a big smile. And I thought, okay. And I answered her and I said, "Yes, the Daniel Hughes. We're all very excited. I hope to see you." So I hope she is here with us today. And it is our honor to welcome today's presenter, the Daniel Hughes, Ph.D., as a clinical psychologist with a limited practice in South Portland, Maine. He founded and developed I knew I was going to do that. Oh, darn. I keep doing it wrong. Dan, please say it.
Diatrician developmental psychotherapy. I'm joking. Dyadic.
Dyadic. Thank you, Dan.
Yes.
The treatment of children who have experienced abuse and neglect and who demonstrate ongoing problems related to attachment and trauma. He has also written several books. I now am officially turning over our webinar to my friend, Dan.
Well, thank you, Nancy. am I to begin now, Karen?
Yes.
Yes, you can begin anywhere you like. If
Oh, I forgot to add that at this point, Dan's going to talk to us for a little bit, and then everybody's going to start jumping in with questions and so forth, and we're going to be more of a panel. But first, we're going to give Dan a few minutes to talk.
Sure. And Dan, if at any point you want me to read aloud any of the learning objective pieces to refocus us, just let me know.
Okay. As well as you might remind me in case I lose focus.
Okay.
But that's another possibility as well.
Right.
Yes. You know, when I was asked to speak and we talked about what would be an appropriate title for this webinar, we came up with building trust with children who have been hurt in relationships. Building trust with children who've been hurt in relationships. And the word attachment's out there, but the word trust is pretty darn close to it. Whereas if you're an infant and you have a parent who is willing and able to meet your needs, you start trusting that person. You relax and you allow them to take the lead. And usually you're fairly good at just accepting their judgment and going along with it because they're pretty good at reading you, knowing what's in your best interest in meeting your needs. So it works well, and the kid trusts the parent. And then actually the parent gets a lot out of it too, because you enjoy caring for a child who's responding to your care, which it gets to another point that if we have time, we could talk about a little bit. It's very hard to care for a child who doesn't want you to care for them. You could do it, you could do your job, but it's hard to keep your heart in the process. But right now, let's focus on trust. That so I'm trusting the key people in my life who tend to be adults, and they tend to be specific adults. They are my caregivers. It might be extended families, it might be a significant other in this child's life. Somebody who has meaning beyond a stranger or a casual neighbor. Well, even that could be a significant other, depending. But so I trust them all. I'm a kid. Kids love relationships with adults. They truly do. Kids love relationships with other kids. Our brains are designed for relationships. Our brains soak up relationships and want them, choose them. Years ago, we had I traveled to Europe a lot, and I laugh because Europeans think we're crazy a bit. They wonder about our fascination with Mozart tapes, audio tapes. You have children listen to Mozart all day? I said, well, I don't think we do. Well, we heard that in America, people think that if you listen to Mozart, is audio tapes of Mozart all day, you end up becoming a genius. So I heard that every American new parent gets a Mozart cassette to play for their kid. I said, well, I didn't. I sort of missed it. But anyway, my point is that babies at birth, prior to birth, well, whenever, right back at the beginning, babies love interactions with human beings, and they love the eyes. They love their mother above all. Babies tend to love, if they have a choice about who I'm going to hang out with, they want their mother. Second choice, this is hard, Jamal. It was hard for me when I first heard it. But the second choice is every other woman in the world. Third choice is their father, which is a bit discouraging when I follow every other woman in the world. However, if fathers work at it, they could quickly move up the ladder, very quickly, past thousands of women every second until finally we're number two. Once in a while, even number one, if we really work at being a co-parent with the child's mother. And that's really good. That's not the point. The point is babies love relationships with people and they trust people. But my goodness, when I work with traumatized babies, traumatized toddlers, traumatized 4-year-olds, I'm often so sad. They don't look at you. They don't like eye contact. I'm not talking about a kid who's overstimulated for a neurological reason by too much eye contact. I'm talking about a kid who is probably neurologically quite well at birth, but after a bit, they stop looking at people. They don't want eye contact because when they look into eyes, they probably see hate, and it frightens them, eye contact. And why would that be? Well, they don't trust anymore. They stop trusting because they were hurt in a relationship with a key person. And then it's hard for them to differentiate that person who hurt them from other people. And then they generalize and they don't trust anybody. And if they've been hurt too long and too often or by too many people, then it's very hard for them to get over that and start to trust again. It's also very sad when you go to a traumatized baby and they don't cry anymore. They stop crying. What a way to communicate when you can't do much else. When you're in distress, you cry. I hope you do. But a lot of these kids didn't cry. That was really sad. You just look at, and this little girl who didn't want to be held. My guess is, again, she was born ready to be held, able to be held, wanting to be held, but then she won. This was a traumatized infant who hated her foster mother. She liked strangers over her foster mother. She's only 6 months of age, which is pretty remarkable to have a differentiated unattachment, to not to want to be close to anybody. But the complex trauma in childhood, the most tends to be relationships, traumatized in a relationship with a key person in your life, family or close to family, has hurt you. And then it leads to complex trauma. And complex trauma is much harder to treat than simple trauma, like a physical accident. This is a relational trauma. And it's harder to treat because of the impairment. The areas of impairment tend to be much more pervasive. The kids tend to have difficulties just about every area of their life. No, these are not 100% certain, but the risk factor is there for 7 different areas. One is attachment, which makes sense. You're not going to trust people, then you're not likely to go to them for safety because they're the people, or people have hurt you. I'm not going to people for safety. So I tend to have a disorganized attachment. The kids often who've been traumatized in a relationship often will have delays in their basic identification of physiological states. They may not know if they're warm or cold. They may, 5-year-old who walks outside in a snowstorm without a coat on, and he doesn't seem to be cold. He just turns off the sensation of cold. And he could freeze out there and not be aware he's freezing. Or he can, a kid who, that I saw, he always thought after a good meal that he was hungry. The problems got worse after he was fed because he thought the sensation of being full meant hunger, and then he would have outrage that he wasn't fed some more. Or the kids who have been traumatized who have turned off their body, the sensation of their body, so they dissociate from it, so not aware of sensations anymore, turn off the sensation of pain. A girl I was treating who was her caregiver was actually referred to Children's Services Child Protective Division for medical neglect because she had an ear infection that was so severe she needed surgery on her middle ear. And the physician said she must have been in excruciating pain for 2 weeks, when in fact she wasn't in any pain. And I had to explain that to the medical people and then the social worker because I knew her history. She had been sexually abused for 4 years. She didn't feel anymore. Her body didn't feel anything. So she wasn't aware of the pain in her ear. Okay, that's a problem, a giant problem, of course. And then the problem of regulating your emotional states. The kids who have been traumatized have a much harder time being able to stay regulated. So their anger becomes rage, their sadness is despair, their fear is terror, a bit of anxiety might lead to just sort of an extreme agitation that just pretty soon they're dysregulated at all. And then we might consider them to have, quote, features of ADHD, when it really is an intense agitation that you just can't regulate. Well, those kids, that's another feature. The fourth one is they have trouble with cognitive problems, overall learning problems. I don't mean specific academic skills, but the risk is their basic associations in their brain, where they can learn language and are good with language. They're good with sensory integration abilities, auditory processing abilities, reflective functioning abilities, and they're likely to have learning disabilities. Their brain is not integrated well. It's not developing as a whole unit very well. So that's a problem, the risk of that. The risk of dissociation under stress, where do they go? Somewhere in their brain, and they just do not, they're not present. Some traumatized kids get into trouble because, excuse me, they were just given a lecture and they repeat right after the lecture what they were told not to do, and they're in trouble. But in fact, when they were given the lecture, they were dissociated because that became their main response to stress. And because the adult who was giving the lecture was angry, the anger generated dissociative state, and the kid wasn't paying attention, was somewhere else, didn't even hear the words. That's a problem. That goes along. There's recently, over the last 10 years or so, mental health professionals have been excited about the research and the theory of one neuropsychologist, Stephen Porges, and his polyvagal theory. And he talks about the need for safety for the brain to work really well. And when we're defensive, when we're not safe, we get defensive. When we are safe, we're open and engaged. And when we're open and engaged, we learn from other people very well. Open to the other person, engage with them in a relationship. And when we're not safe, we get very defensive and we get sort of tunnel vision, and we don't learn very much other than things related to safety. So that, and he did some research showing that when, excuse me, when a kid is frightened, they don't hear the human voice very well. They give priority to loud sounds, fear. And the differential skills necessary to really, human voice is very complex. And if we're safe, we can understand it much better. So in fact, if you want a kid to listen to what you're saying, you have to say it with a voice that doesn't generate fear, especially with a traumatized kid, because the fear interferes with them being able to understand what you're saying. I'm not saying it's 100% zero, it's a continuum, but it's going to make it harder for a kid who's challenged anyway to learn from what I'm trying to tell them if I'm angry when I'm telling them. Okay, where was I? If we have a kid who experienced complex trauma through a relational trauma in childhood, then that kid is likely to need to have to integrate that event that occurred, that was traumatic event. Otherwise, you say, well, should we let sleeping dogs lie? Forget about it. Why stir it up? Well, because actually it's still in his brain. And if it's still in his brain, and the way we control it is to sort of put in a little box so we don't look at that part of his brain, it's going to wake up at some point. And I'd rather him wake up when he's with caring people around him, rather than wake up at a very inopportune time when he's stressed and then he lashes out and kicks somebody in the head. So I want to say it needs to be integrated, is my point. Otherwise, the kid is not safe because part of his brain is not safe. And we need to be able to reflect on it so it doesn't generate terror and rage. It generates sadness and fear and anger, but not terror and rage anymore. And so we have to be able to integrate that. And then another when you've been traumatized in a relationship, you're at risk for problems in the development of your self-identity, your sense of self. Two major problems. Problem number one, you can have a lot of shame. If you've been hurt in a relationship, you tend to blame yourself. You're a kid. You don't get it. Oh no, this adult is abusing me, or this adult is being very inappropriate. Kids don't get that. Kids are likely to think it's me. Why would the adult hit me if it wasn't for me doing something wrong? So the traumatized kids tend to have a lot of shame about what happened to them by adults in their life. Shame is really not a good emotion to be able to carry, that you have to carry around with all the time. For a lot of reasons, it shuts down your ability to learn from mistakes and your ability to engage other people well. We'll go into that later if we want, but a second thing about in terms of your development of self, and this is sort of known, but I don't think we know the significance of it enough and the importance of it. Traumatized kids tend to have a much harder time dealing with transitions. Now, we sort of know that by hearsay and by experience. Every teacher knows that. A lot of parents know that. They don't deal with transitions. Now, why won't they deal with transitions? Because their sense of self has to reorganize every time they go from one event, one circumstance to the next. They don't have an integrated sense of self. It's very fragmented. And so it coalesces around the external world. Then they move to another classroom and they have to recoalesce. They coalesces around one activity, then it has to recoalesce. It has to sort of do it again each time. Whereas the kids who are able to have an integrated brain, they go from one person, one relationship, one activity, one place to the next. And yeah, you might wobble for a second, but then you're on target again. Your sense of self is steady, and it doesn't have to be reorganized each time you go from one situation to another. So as a result, you have pervasive problems. These are not PTSD problems. What is that? Plus a lot. And the lot is where the problem comes in, because the lot interferes with resolving them. When I mentioned 7 major areas of your functioning that don't work well when you've been traumatized in a relationship, those are also the areas of your functioning that are needed to resolve the trauma. So we got a big problem.
And can I interrupt you for a second? When you're talking about the integration and the moving forward, there's been a lot of comments in chat and one particular question in the Q&A about healing from that and how relationships can you heal through relationships, and your thoughts on the earned secure attachment, and whether, basically summarizing like kind of all the things in chat, is if you have a child who has difficulty integrating, are they ever going to be able to heal and have functional adult relationships, or are they always going to be this way?
The good news is that we can recover. And to answer, well, how? And I think one of the questions suggested that, through relationships. You're hurt in relationships, then the healing occurs in relationships. I'm not saying it's impossible. There's been some debate on that. Suppose I develop really powerful mindfulness training, meditation skills. Would that be sufficient to heal? Some people say probably yes. Other people say I'm not so sure. I'm saying, why do we have to choose? Why not have both? And so let's really work on relationships that are healing relationships, and supportive relationships, and relationships that help us to transform. And it gets to another question you had there, Dana, which was the notion of earned secure attachment. And that means, because you start reading about, the percentage of kids who are securely attached, say it's 70% or 65%. And then you say, well, so 35% are never going to make it. And mental health professionals especially laugh and say, boy, I'm doomed. Knowing my history, I don't have a chance. Because actually, when I was a kid, I wasn't securely attached. Let's face the truth here. But so the notion came up of what's called earned secure, which is you can develop a secure attachment as an adult, even though you never had as a child. Because attachment is not rigid, but it's also has a pattern, and it can change based on new experiences, especially relational experiences. So if the attachment pattern I had as a child was based on relationship experiences that were pervasive and did not generate security. But now I'm older and I have new relationships, and it may be a great counselor, a great teacher, or a great friend. And I have enough of those, and they go enough along. I start to rethink relationships, rethink myself, and I may well be able to have a secure attachment as a pattern style of relating as an adult that I didn't have as a child. One study suggested you could probably, and I thought this is sort of paradoxical in a way. If I don't have a secure attachment pattern, but I get a partner who does, I tend to become the pattern of my partner. It tends to go uphill. So if you have an insecure person with a secure person, after a bit, you both tend to be more secure, which I think is pretty good if that's accurate. However, I don't know if I dare say this. That study is stronger findings when it's the woman who's secure and the man's insecure. When the man's secure and the woman's not, the man just sort of bails out. Whereas if the woman's secure and the male's not, she tends to hang in there until he finally catches up to her. That's overstating. I shouldn't have even said that, because I think probably the majority of that research would not be consistent with that, or is not replicated enough. Why don't we say that? But anyway, my point, Dana, is that relationships matter, and that can undo a lot of trauma in prior to relationships by having new relationships that can generate safety.
It certainly fits with the research on the importance of a therapeutic relationship, but it also speaks to how powerful a secure relationship with a teacher or a caregiver could be to a child whose attachment style was not particularly secure.
Yes, for sure. It really, really does. It can make a difference.
Yeah, somebody in the chat said, so are you saying that mothers are to blame for psychopathology? You want to comment on that?
The mothers are to blame for psychopathology. I'm saying that the significant adults in a child's life can generate a great deal of mental health problems. I'm saying that probably there's more of a consensus on the environmental impact causing mental health problems than on any genetic impact.
Right.
In terms of quantity, in terms of numbers. I'm saying that now there's much greater awareness of the impact of trauma on children's development. And those are in relationships we're talking about. I'm not minimizing the trauma of being in a car accident, but the pervasive problems dealing with relational trauma, I'm saying are very crucial. So I'm saying that when a child develops mental health problems, I have to, in good conscience, for best practice, address their relationships with their parents. Am I blaming the parent? No, I'm addressing the relationships with the parent, which means that if I see struggles the parents are having in order to co-regulate with their child, to stay present with the child when the child is terrified, I have to help the parent to undo things possibly from their childhood. Mm-hmm. And the grandparents from the great grandparents, and let's go back 1,000 years here. So I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just saying let's get started with developing the ability of adults to provide healthy relationships with children. And if the adult is challenged with that, then I want to help the adult develop healthy relationships in their own life.
Yeah.
period.
Yeah. And that's a question that people have been asking, for many, many years, which is why I went ahead and shared it. But I think your point is well taken, that for one of the reasons this is important is because that secure attachment is such a protective factor. That it's not about blame, it's about how do we move in the other direction? How do we protect kids from stress? And someone else in the chat had an interesting question based on some things you said recently about, does the attachment research study children of two fathers? The presence of women as attachment figures is it somehow biologically hardwired or socialized due to women's societal role? And since you mentioned about how kids prefer the mother as their initial attachment, what do you think might happen, or what do you know about the research on children with two fathers?
That's not my specialty. The research I have read is there's no difference. There are no differences that two fathers or two mothers can have healthy, securely attached children.
Yeah. Okay. So.
And the statistics, the percentage of how many are securely attached is quite similar to a family where there's a man and a woman as the parents.
Mm-hmm. And the mothering role may be separate from gender.
For sure.
Yeah.
Might move into more temperament then. One of
Yeah.
the men may be more naturally the more maternal, quote unquote, and the other man is more of the other, and vice versa. And same with two women. That the worries about that were really used to be big, and now I would say the consensus is no. It's the kids can thrive in a gay or lesbian household.
Yeah. Well, so, you went through the 7 factors there in the domains of impairment that can be caused by complex trauma of childhood. And each one of those, I imagine people in the audience can think of children and situations where they noticed something about any of these 7 areas. One of the things that came to my mind when you were giving your example, when you talked about how kids can dissociate and how it can impact their memory, and they can be looking right at you but not really hearing you, it reminded me of discussions that have taken place in some of your workshops about whether you should force a child to make eye contact with you. Particularly if you know that they have attachment issues. But that also brought up one of the other learning objectives for today, which has to do, and I think people are asking in the chat, what are some of the implications of these 7 things and of children's attachment style in terms of how we interact with them clinically, but also in other settings. So I imagine that one of your answers would have to do with pace. That maybe we could move towards talking about, unless you want to talk about intersubjectivity first, that you may want to talk about some of your thoughts on how we interact with kids who have these problems.
Can I do both or try to blend the two together?
Sure.
Let's take our guidance. Always, when I was early days as a psychologist, I was interested in trauma in childhood right from the word go when I became a clinical psychologist, and trying to understand, how do I help these traumatized children? Why can't I help them very well? Why was I failing with them over and over again? And then as luck would have it, I had 3 little kids at home running around who were not traumatized. So I could compare them with my kids, with the kids I was working with in the office. And then I started comparing in my mind, what were my kids getting that these kids didn't get it? And can I give it to them? Is it too late? The 7-year-old who's really sort of hardwired, it seems, in a way that he just can't regulate at all, and he can't reflect, and he can't engage with me in a reciprocal, taking turns, sharing, taking delight in each other way. And I thought, I got to find a way to approach these kids closer to their developmental age rather than their chronological age. And I got to start where they respond to me. And I have to start in a way similar to how we relate to little kids, biological kids that we have, which the notion is intersubjective. which is intersubjectivity refers to the way human beings relate to each other, where it's most obvious with a parent and a baby, but it's true with a parent and an 8-year-old or a 12-year-old, true with a teacher and a 3-year-old and an 8-year-old and a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old. It's true in relationships between the two adults. It's when there's a key person in our life and they're with us, they share their experiences of the car or the dog or us, that influences our experience of the car or the dog or ourselves in a way that if my friend is very interested in me, I feel more interesting. If they take delight in me, I'm delightful. If they take joy in being with me, I feel more enjoyable. If they love me, I feel more lovable. Qualities that we have in ourselves become part of our identity, really emerge as an infant in my parents' experience of me. Well, as luck would have it, not luck, but survival or evolution or whatever we call it, parents have a positive bias towards seeing their children. So they discover wonderful things about their kids. They discover the delightful things, the enjoyable things, the incredible things, the interesting things. And we experience love and we communicate that. So that way of being just permeates. Okay, now if we have a kid who doesn't trust, how does a parent show those things? By nonverbal communications, because words are not too important to an infant, the actual word itself. It's the prosody of the voice. It's the rhythm of your voice. It's the inflections, the pauses, the emphasis, the intensity of it. Various aspects, different aspects of how we actually say the words. Well, what they found then, and what the researchers have found then, is that when we get in that reciprocal nonverbal interaction, it synchronizes. And then our ability to sort of stay with the infant in this synchronized way of being actually helps to organize the brain of the infant. So the brain becomes in sync with our brain. And actually it starts to organize the patterns and the integration of aspects of their brain. And I thought, boy, this is cool. And this is what I do with my own kids. Why can't I do it in therapy? So then I started to develop the ability to relate to kids who don't relate to me. And then I looked at how to do that. With infants, it's easy. How about a 7-year-old who doesn't look at me or calls me stupid or tells me to shut up or hits me or looks out the window, who does things that are not sort of not engaged in a relationship. This 7-year-old has so many defenses because he doesn't trust people. He's going it alone. His skills, his survival skills, 3 key survival skills when a kid doesn't trust. One is to intimidate adults. Yeah, you do that, you'll pay. Some kids call it payback. They're very upfront about it. Payback, you hurt me, I'll hurt you. I didn't hurt you. You wouldn't let me do what I wanted to do. I define that as hurting me. So I'll hurt you back and I'll find a way. So I intimidate adults, or I become a master of manipulating adults, which tends to make adults kind of annoyed. But this is a survival skill. If I can't get adults to meet my needs, I got to learn how to manipulate them. Otherwise, I'll starve to death. They're not going to do it because they love me, because they want to meet my needs. So I got to manipulate and become masters. So I learn how to intimidate, learn how to manipulate. And I also learn how to avoid all, stay under the radar, be invisible. Now, that's probably not the best survival skill 100% of the time, but 95 might be good. And then 5% I intimidate or manipulate. 95, I might be able to get a way to get food on my own and keep myself safe on my own. You know, it tends to be a pretty barren life, and it tends to be not very successful. But if I can't trust an adult, that's where I'm tend to do. So in doing that, then I turn off these relational skill development that we have with eye contact, with prosody in our voice, with getting a synchronized nonverbal conversation going, where we actively listen and talk and share and be interested in stuff and help kids to see the meaning of things through the meaning we give to things. help intersubjectivity has three major components to it. One is how to join attention with the other kid, with the other person. And parents do it naturally. And kids are soak it up naturally. We attend to the same things, unless they've been traumatized. We also have what's called attunement. Some people call it attunement, which is to synchronize our affective experience. So we're actually feeling a similar thing, or not the feeling, but experiencing it in a rich way that it's either we're both feeling joy, or if one of us is angry, the other one has empathy for your anger. So you are in sync, even though I'm not angry. And then the third way is have joint intentions. We want the same thing. We're working, we're cooperating. These are very important skills. So, and they're facilitated by intersubjectivity, joint attention, shared affective states, and complementary intentions or cooperation. So I'm thinking, I got those with my kids. I got to do it with these kids. How do I do it? And I kept experimenting and worrying, and how do I translate with my own kids to these kids? And I realized the attitude that works most consistently most of the time, I call PACE, which is an acronym that stands for being playful with the kids, accepting them. 100% of the time, I totally accept the experience of the child I'm working with. I only evaluate behavior. I only set limits on behavior. I don't evaluate the experience that led to the behavior. The kid kicked his brother because he's jealous of his brother. Now, I may set a limit on kicking your brother, but I accept that he's jealous of his brother, and then I try to understand, why is he jealous of his brother? How can I help him with his jealousy? How does he make sense of that? How do I make sense of that? And let's address it without evaluating it. We'll learn from it. Or he hates his brother, or his parent, or his teacher. His experience is something I don't evaluate. When kids say, I hate you, you stupid, stupid therapist, I'm happy because he shared his experience. Now, if he punches me or spits at me, I'm not happy. I evaluate behavior. You could hate me. This one kid, I was working with him and his dad, because I do a family approach, because I want to facilitate that relationship between a parent and child. This one kid, he's with his dad, and it was a good session. At the end of the session, they're doing a little roughhouse play. They're both laughing and giggling, and a little break in the action. And he sits there and he looks at me, he leans over and he spits in my face. I'm not happy with that. So I was very firm. I'm not for spitting on. In this office, everybody is safe. And that means you don't get spit on. I won't spit on you, you don't spit on me. Any idea why you spit on me? Totally accepting his motive for spitting on me, but not accepting his behavior of spitting on me. And it took us a while to figure it out, but you know why he spit on me? You're desperate to know, because he wasn't angry with me at all.
Dr. Hughes, Brandy here. I'm from the Pennsylvania Key, and we do a lot of work on behalf of the Office of Child Development and Early Learning in childcare programs, raising quality, preventing expulsion and suspension. And I have an amazing team of about 28, soon to be 30 consultants in the field that are going into childcare programs and really trying to work with those early childhood educators to support the social emotional development of young children, many of whom have more than likely had some adverse childhood experiences and even trauma. How would you, what kind of, I guess, advice or maybe strategies could you point us to thinking about PACE in an early childhood setting and using maybe some of that way of being with those early childhood educators to support the young children that they're caring for?
Yeah, I have specific ideas on that. And in some ways, it's easier for a young child than an 8-year-old because it's more intuitive. It's the way I am with infants. So it's easier to translate that to a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old than a 12-year-old or a 15-year-old. But I do, but it's a little trickier. But before I can, it's interesting, this model, use PACE in a way, because basically I'm developing stories about why you spit on me, for example, or the story of why you swore at your father, or the story of why you stole from your friend. I'm not evaluating, I'm just trying to understand the meaning of it without any judgment about it. And it's interesting, the better I got at developing and noticing stories and what is a story, I developed a compulsion to finish a story. So along a roundabout way, Brandy, I have to tell you first, before I could respond to your statement and question, I have to finish my story about why the kids spit on me. Otherwise, I will get tense. Everyone else may have forgotten that I never finished the story, but I cannot.
Oh, Chad is going crazy, wondering why you haven't told everyone why he spit on you.
Well,
So-
thank you, Dana. Thank you.
So go for that.
It's not just me. Well, he spit on me because he could not regulate his intense, excited joy over his time with his dad. That was the closest he's probably felt with his dad in 3 years. So why would he spit on me? Because he couldn't regulate the intense positive emotion. Does that remind you of anybody? Babies. When they get real excited, what's the danger? They bite you. Has anybody here ever been bitten by a baby? I have. And it's not when they're angry with you, it's when they're all excited. They're having a grand time. I was on, wow, they give you this big bite. And they look at you surprised because you're a little upset with them. You try not to be, but man, it does hurt sometimes when they bite you. Anyway, that's why this kid spit at me. I'm positive of it. And we were able to figure it out. He felt better, and his dad felt better. His dad felt a little bad. And I forgave him quicker because he couldn't regulate the positive emotion. So, all right, now I'm good. So getting back to your question there, Brandy, I would keep in mind, and the danger, and parents sometimes make this danger too, is that because the kid can talk now, he's verbal, now we think our main way of influencing this kid is verbal. It's through lectures, in teaching cognitively, when in fact, most social emotional learning is nonverbal. The heart of my message to the kid is my nonverbal interest, excitement, joy, fascination, worry, vigilance about something. He or she will respond to that, my nonverbal expressions of communication, as well as my response to them and their activity. We're giving meaning. The kid is doing something, I look at him and I look a little tense. He realizes my message here is that you're doing something that is worrying me, maybe upsetting me, but maybe frightening me. So the kid probably will if he has a relationship with me, he'll probably be a little more aware of what he's doing and probably be more likely to inhibit it just because of my nonverbal expression. Anyway, so I want to remind myself of that and remind a person working with a 3 and 4-year-old, those kids are probably very receptive to nonverbal expressions, and which means they're, for better and worse. Then if I'm having a bad day, those kids are probably more vulnerable to my being bored, my being frustrated, my being annoyed, even though it has nothing to do with them. They will experience it as it has something to do with them. And it's likely to put them in a defensive mode, in a pull back mode, maybe an anxious mode, especially if they've been traumatized in a relationship. Traumatized kids will say, why are you screaming at me? When all you did was say, hey, don't do that. And they experience it as screaming because they're so hypervigilant, hypersensitive, hyperreactive in relationships. So I'd be stressing that. I'd also be stressing with them, Brandy, about stories. I just sort of got that in there for a bit anyway, a little bit of advertisement for stories. 3-year-olds love stories. They do. You have trouble, a kid has trouble going to sleep at night, tell them a story. I was consulting with a program that kids lived there and the kids wouldn't sleep, and I said, tell them stories. And sure enough, the kids started falling to sleep better until one of the newer staff, the young man, told them a horror story. These are traumatized children, and he's trying to get them to sleep with a horror story. so I realized from then on I had to be much more explicit about the types of stories you tell traumatized kids when you want them to sleep at night. But not just stories of teddy bears and rabbits and all, but also stories of their own life. Like, so the kid is upset because the other kid in the program got something and he's not able to get it yet, or for whatever reason. And you look at him, you say, oh, you really wanted that, didn't you? I could see how much you wanted that. Billy has, and he's having so much fun. And you said, but I want to have it because, and I will have fun too. And now you're kind of sad because I can't let you have it for whatever reason it is. But you want it, and I feel badly because I can't give it to you. Oh, you might be a bit angry with me now. I could see that. You say, well, if Billy has it, I should have it. And oh man, I wish I could give you something like that, but I can't give it to you. What can we do differently? I wonder what we could do differently. I wonder, do you think maybe if we did this, maybe that would work in a similar way to what Billy had? It's different, but maybe it'd be a little similar, and maybe you'd find some of that sort of happy feeling that Billy has. Shall we try it? Or my voice goes with them into a new possibility. You know, you might say, I'm redirecting the kid, but I'm saying it's much more complex than that. It's joining him where he is in the story that he's experiencing, which is Billy gets it and I don't, I want it. And you say, no, I'm really annoyed. And put it all together into, let's see if we could sort of have your story. Billy is one story. Your story can evolve in a slightly different way. And my guess is you'll discover a happy ending to it as something, you know, because of my enthusiasm, the kid probably will join me in this alternative story. But the nonverbal leads it, guides it. And I think in general, Brandy, I think you have an advantage over a teacher who works with 8-year-olds or 12-year-olds or 15-year-olds, because I think those people are more likely to have trouble doing that. How do I modify that for an 8-year-old? How do I modify it for a 12 or 15-year-old? And it takes practice. And you also, you can mess up. And the 15-year-old will look at you and you think I'm a baby? Don't talk to me like that. You know, they get real annoyed with you about that. So you have to learn how to modify it. But I don't forget the rhythm of my voice when I'm talking with kids about, if I go into reason, I tend to lose kids about social emotional realities. If I go into that rational tone, the monotone, the lecturing tone. It's interesting, Porges found the same thing. Monotones tend to make kids defensive. Monotones, lectures are way overrated as a way to influence children.
And when you were answering Brandy, like it really brought to mind like the first 3 parts of PACE and really thinking about that playfulness and the stories and just that overall acceptance and helping them be curious while you're curious about them. But I wonder if you can expand for some of our participants on the empathy part of PACE to really tie in how that works when you're working with children who have experienced trauma.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Dana. Because it's really an important part, and sometimes it's misunderstood as reassurance. You know, an example would be the kid comes home from school and he says, he's all upset. Oh, son, why are you so upset? Nobody likes me at school. You know, everybody's mean to me. Nobody likes me. That's the kid's experience. Okay. So a parent says, oh, Billy, of course somebody likes you at school. Remember Johnny visited 2 weeks ago? And you talked so much about how Susan seemed to be friendly with you yesterday. So don't forget Johnny and Susan, they like you. And the parent thinks that's empathy. Well, that's reassurance. Because it contradicts the kid's experience, which is nobody likes me. By saying, at least 2 people do like you. So then it tries to make the experience better by saying it's not so bad. But that's not empathy. The problem with reassurance is the kid may not feel you get it, his experience. And the kid may feel that you're trying to talk him out of his experience, like he's wrong. And then the kid doesn't trust you that you know what you're talking about, and or he doesn't trust that you're interested in his experience, or you're just trying to fix him or something. Okay, so instead, empathy would be, nobody at school likes me, you know, nobody wants to play with me, da, da. Oh my goodness, son, if nobody at school likes you, that'd be so hard for you. I'll bet you feel very lonely there. I could see where school would be something you probably wouldn't feel like going to if no. Notice the if word. I'm not agreeing with them. I'm just saying if you experience, if it seems to you that nobody likes you, how hard would that be? Oh my goodness, son. I'm so sad that every day, I think you're saying it seems that way every day. So I'm curious now. Does it seem every day that nobody likes you? Oh, well, if it seems that way day after day after day, oh my goodness, it'd be so difficult going to school. It'd be so hard. Would you like a cuddle? Would you like, can I hold you a little bit? Can I help you with that? That it's so sad if that's your experience every day after day after day. It is. Now I could be curious. First, the empathy really helps him know I get his pain, his sadness, and his experience that nobody likes him. And then with my curiosity, because now the empathy sort of helps him to get close to me because I get his experience and I'm comforting him over his experience. That comfort increases attachment. You rely on somebody who comforts you. You do, sort of a natural tendency. So now he's relying on me more. He's sitting there. And now my gentle question can be, does it seem that way every day? Are there ever times it doesn't seem that way? Is there ever a time that you think of one kid who might like you sometimes? Are you ever uncertain about it? My curiosity can open the child's mind to the possibility that his statement that nobody likes him is a bit generalized. It might have been a bit of a stretch. It wasn't quite that bad, but he's now open. Then he says, well, maybe Johnny the other day, he was nice to me or something. He did help me or, you know, whatever. Okay, so now you're saying that maybe sometimes it seems that Johnny might like you. I'm very tentative about it. And then by the end of that conversation, I might say to the kid, you know, knowing that you is the way I do and the person you are and how much I enjoy having you around and what a great kid I experience you to be. My guess is that some of the kids do like you and maybe don't show it enough or show you in a way that you could feel it. And you start to get discouraged and think none do. And my guess is that, I don't know, maybe tomorrow you might notice one or more or some of the kids liking you. Boy, if you do, I'll bet you feel so good inside. And if you do, please come running home and tell me about it, all right? So I'm laying the seed for not missing something that might be there all along. Well, anyway, that'd be an example. I got to start with empathy, and then there might be room for wondering, and there might be room for some reassurance. And it's the same with the kid saying to a mother or father, you don't love me, you love Johnny more than me. It'd be the same response. My goodness, son, it'd be so difficult if you think I don't love you. I'm your parent. And if you feel, you must feel so lonely at home. If you feel I don't love you, you must be so hard for you living in a home where you think your mother and father love your brother more than you. Oh, would that be difficult? So again, it would start with reassurance rather than, of course I love you. How could you say that? None of that stuff. It would be right with them in their experience. That's empathy. And that usually opens the door for lots of good conversations that the child is open to looking at it somewhat differently. If you hear when they start out by saying this very negative experience, we help them to accept it. Empathy helps them to look at it and stay with it. It co-regulates the energy associated with it. So I love empathy, except when it doesn't work. Well, I don't dislove it. I don't dislike it then, but sometimes empathy doesn't work. I used to say it was like aspirin, it worked all the time, but that also can hurt your stomach. why wouldn't empathy work? It doesn't work sometimes when the kid doesn't want to be vulnerable. Because empathy will tend to move a kid toward vulnerability. Teenagers often don't like it. They don't want to be vulnerable. They want to be tough. They want to be mad. Or if a kid has a lot of anger to express and hasn't expressed it yet, and you express empathy, that makes them want to forgive you. And they don't want to forgive you yet. They want to have their day in court to yell at you and fuss for a while before they can let it go. So sometimes they just sort of fuss for a while and they don't want to experience empathy. So then I'm not gonna say, oh my goodness, that must be so hard if you feel I won't say that. I would say, yeah, my guess is that's pretty hard for you. I'll take the emotion out of my voice and just be more matter of fact. And then the kid, that's sort of a low intensity empathy, more of a cognitive empathy, which is valid. It's not as powerful, but it does help a kid settle a little bit until he's ready for the full empathy, the full emotionally comforting empathy.
Dan, in some of the questions, people are acknowledging that some kids, especially the ones that really have been hurt in relationships, might need an awful lot of support. So some therapists are wondering, can kids recover from this in adulthood? How much support like this do they need in order to recover some of that trust? If a child is still growing up with an adult that has hurt them in relationships, what does it take? They're asking, what does it take for that child to be able to trust again and move on?
Yeah, it's a real powerful, important question that I don't think we have a great answer to. There's no test to say this kid will respond. There's no test to say he won't respond. There's so many reasons to think kids can respond, but will this unique child respond to this unique adult? You probably don't know in advance. Is every kid worth the trial? I would say so. And I'm not the adult for every kid, but every client of mine is worth a try, or every kid in my classroom if I'm a teacher, so how do I maximize the likelihood the kid will respond? Let's just take some of the basics that I just mentioned in passing, like when I correct a child, keep the anger out of my voice. Do it more non-evaluative, but more descriptive. You really were upset about that, and so you end up punching Billy in the head. Yeah, I could see it. You must have been so angry with Billy. Can you help me understand what the anger was so about? What made it so big and da 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 da. Okay, now I have a better understanding about what is this. So what can I do to help you so you don't punch him in the head again? And by the way, Billy, how are you going to help Billy to sort of maybe forgive you for punching him in the head? And are there other things I could do to help you so that the likelihood of your punching him in the head is less? I've noticed when I supervise kids more closely, they punch kids in the head less. I think I'm going to try that. You don't like supervision? Well, I understand that. I have empathy for you. You don't like supervision. It must be hard. Yeah, I'll try to be sneaky about it, I'll try to be like a friend rather than a police officer, but I will be sort of firm about you don't punch people in the head. And I'll be very clear about it. So anyway, I don't want to minimize that. The question is a very good one. That sometimes the kids may need a lot, maybe more than a school can offer, maybe more than a therapist can offer. It may be we have to get the whole community somehow involved more effectively. We might have to have more time. We have to have more resources, and we may have to be very patient with this process. It might be really slow, and we may have to take it on faith. This kid might make it, but we don't know when it'll start, because that can wear us down when the kid isn't responding. And I also found over the years, I can't tell the ones who do respond and the ones who don't. I can't tell them apart.
Yeah.
And so why can't I? I guess our diagnostic abilities, or at least mine, aren't good enough. And it may be there's something historical. Maybe the kid who responded did have a neighbor who helped the kid to start to differentiate the adults who see something good about him that he could trust, and the adults who don't see anything good about him that he can't trust. Maybe there was somebody back in the early days in his life that gave him hope that he isn't a bad kid, and all adults are not going to be mean to him. And maybe I could remind him of that adult, and then my message I'm giving him. And so I will emphasize how I am with younger kids. I will emphasize accepting the experience. Parents may say that, I'm not mad at you, I'm just mad at what you're doing, but the anger confuses the point.
Mhm.
I have to be able to communicate. I am angry at your behavior, but not you. It's also very important to repair the relationship over and over and over again. That's the adult's responsibility, not to apologize, but to take them aside. Are you okay? I was angry, you were angry, and now you're not able to do what you really wanted to do. Are you angry about that? How can I help you with that? Because you're still not able to do it. Maybe I could help you in the future not to do that so you can do it the next time. Love to do that because you're really struggling here and it's really hard for you that I can't allow you to do this right now or whatever. So I got to remember principles that we use with younger children. And I cannot, how do I say this? I'm fairly good over the years at being able not to get angry when kids call me names and stuff. And tell me their experience that I'm a stupid fool and I don't know anything about anything. And I had to go back to therapy school to learn how to be somewhat competent. And then I get interested in that. I get excited about it. I'm curious about it. What would it take? What sort of a therapist are they looking for and stuff like that? So I'm pretty good at it. But one of the reasons I'm good at it is my curiosity is pretty strong.
Mhm.
And in my commitment to meaning is very big. When I supervise therapists and they get defensive with a client, I said, why are you defensive? Well, he said, he said this. And why are you defensive? Well, he said this. Okay, so why did he say that? He's being rude. Why is he being rude? I'm looking, usually I'm going to go deeper and deeper into the motives of the kid's quote misbehavior. Well, maybe misbehavior. He's being very awful to me. Until I find a reason. Usually the reason is the reason he doesn't trust me. It has something to do with anything. Could be that I'm a man. It could be I have authority. It could be that I said no to him about something that he wanted to play with. And he doesn't trust me. And I remind him of somebody who abused his trust years ago. And now he experienced me as similar to that person. So the meaning given often helps me not to respond in anger and rejecting. And the meaning when I am able to understand the meaning, it helps me to know what to do about the behavior. We often give consequences before we know the meaning, when the consequence could make it worse until we know the meaning. I mean, you can't give a consequence. It could be the opposite of what he needs. We got to know the meaning first. And so suppose he swore at his father. Well, look, I'm not happy about swearing at your father. I could see that. So you swore at your dad. So we're developing a story around swearing at your dad. We don't have time for it, but a quick version of it, you swore at your dad. Okay. Yeah, you got very angry. Why? You won't let me play with my friend. Okay, I see you got angry about it. Really angry. I wonder why your anger is that big. Why would it be that big? Well, I'm going to ask the question. The question won't get an answer because he doesn't reflect very well. He doesn't know why his anger is that big. Because he won't let me play with my friend. And you got really angry. Wonder why that? Because he won't let me play. They'll get stuck on him. Okay, so I have to lead them into the meaning of why the dad didn't let him play with his friend. And often, I don't want the kid to think too much because he won't be able to come up with a meaning because it's not a cognitive thing. I got to get him to react. So that means talk fast. Raise the pitch of your voice and talk really fast. So why are you angry? He won't let me play with it. Well, why would he let you play with your friend? Just like that. And without thinking, he will blurt something out. And it's usually something like, Well, he doesn't care what I want. He just thinks I'm a bad kid. He just wants to punish me all the time. So it's a deeper meaning than he wanted to play with my friend. Now we have something to work with. Oh my goodness, so it seems to you that your dad doesn't care about what you want. Okay, oh, that'd be hard. If he doesn't care what you want, that'd be very hard. Wait a second, why doesn't he care about what you want? He doesn't care about me. Oh my gosh, if your dad doesn't care about you, that'd be very, very hard. Why would he care about you? Because this is a bit simplistic. I know it's not this smooth usually, but often that's where we end up going, into themes of trust. He doesn't care about me, and we end of the day, the conversation goes to, he's disappointed in me. He thinks I'm a bad kid. He thinks he likes Billy more than me. He wishes he had another son. Sometimes I think he doesn't want to be my dad anymore. And this kid who is so oppositional, so angry, now has tears in his eyes over the realization that his behavior has been reflecting his experience, which is that his dad is disappointed in him and may have second thoughts about being his father. Now, if I've helped the child to go into the meaning of why he swore at his dad, where's dad going to be on this if he believes the child's experience? And we tend to believe people non-verbally. It's so easy to tell when a kid is just putting words out there because he thinks it'll get him off the hook. You can tell when a kid is faking it. So the kid, I know he's genuine. If I know it, the dad almost always knows it. Then I look at and I say, tell your dad. He says, no. Can I tell him for you? Dad, sometimes I feel you're disappointed in me because it just, I just think that when you say no about things, you're disappointed that sometimes I'm not even sure you want to be my dad. Well, what's dad going to say? Now, he still may be in trouble for swearing. There still may be a quote consequence for swearing, but the biggest consequence is going to be dad is going to find a way to help this kid know how much he loves him. And the conflicts got in the way, or his dad isn't that expressive, and he has to find another way to show how much he loves this boy. He's able to comfort the boy over his sense that his dad doesn't love him. And the comfort, boy, that's the best way to reassure his kid that he does love him, and to help the kid recover from that sense of I'm a bad kid, and help him to trust his dad.
Thank you, Dan. We've got about 20 minutes, and I want to, if we can, maybe go over some of the specific questions that we're getting in the chat, and also I may try to combine some of them that are similar. And at some point, I'd like to hear from some of our panelists. They have some specific system-related questions as well. There were a couple of questions in the area of who this kind of approach might work for. You mentioned that trauma can have a neurological impact. Sometimes it can make kids look like they have ADHD or memory problems or other kinds of cognitive impairments. And somebody was interested in whether or not this would work with children with FASD, fetal alcohol syndrome, and they're wondering if let's see, somebody else had another neurological question about, how you tell if the problem a child is having cognitively, is there a way to tell if that's trauma related or just some other reason? Like, is there, does it look different sometimes?
Do you want me to respond to that, or were you?
Or do any of the panelists want to respond to any of those?
I'm happy to. There certainly is an overlap, and say we have a fetal alcohol question, and for good reasons. So what do I do? Well, in general, I think I would read up on fetal alcohol. I would look at specific interventions that probably are focusing more on here and now stuff, and very concrete and small directions and a lot of repetition and a lot of supervision, and let's try to get, build those build the connections with a lot of quote reinforcement, supervision, modeling, coaching, all that stuff. I think my approach would keep in mind the need for me to generate safety, to always generate safety. So, and if I'm aware of a diagnosis that includes neurological limitations, probably I'll be more patient. I won't get frustrated as easily. I will accept he or she is probably doing the best of their ability. Let's just sort of go where he is and zone of proximal development, one step, baby step at a time, accept no progress today, and just hope and just stay connected. Look at specific interventions to increase the likelihood of success in the specific incident, specific things that are happening. So anyway, I would say that it's sort of the model that I used to generate safety and developing trust was for trauma. But how can that go wrong? How could that not help, even if it's only an extra 10% for any problem? If the kid is able to rely on me more, feel safe with me, be relaxed with me, able to focus better, able to reflect better, it's going to help any problem.
And I think I would just echo that too, thinking specifically around the educational realm. We're really having a lot of conversations about creating trauma-informed spaces and creating trauma-informed schools. And I would echo what Dan said. If you're being trauma-informed and you're creating safe spaces for students, all you're going to do is, like, the worst case scenario is you just created an opportunity for their brains to relax and them to be able to integrate more memories and learn more and learn quicker, and their brains to process faster. You're not gonna, creating trauma-informed spaces where you really focus on safety in those relationships is not gonna harm children. It's not gonna harm staff, it's not gonna harm administrators. So it's a way for you in an educational setting to really think about, how do I create safe spaces without going through and feeling the need to identify which children have experienced trauma? Because as educators, that's not really the role that you're placed in. But you do, going back to Dan's earlier discussion about relationships, you do have that prime opportunity to create a relationship that can inspire healing and really empower that healing journey for families and for students. And so it's a great way to not come at it from a therapist point of view, but to come at it from just that relationship focus that Dan was talking about. I think not all educators are therapists, but all educators can have a therapeutic relationship where they create themselves as safe spaces.
Well, yeah, I really agree with what you're saying. I like it's a safe place for everybody, including the staff. Staff we function so much better as adults when we're safe with the other adults in our environment. In PACE, which Karen asked me to talk about initially, I developed it for therapists. But man, it's used more by teachers now. There are many schools that have brought PACE into the curriculum, into every they have a day on PACE every year in teacher training days. So many foster and adoptive programs have PACE as central in their training. So for parents, for educators, it's just a way of being to generate safety, and then new learning opportunity to wonder safely, to wonder, and to feel close and get comfort through empathy, and feel I'm accepted who I am, for better or for worse. My behaviors will be challenged and addressed safely.
So Dr. Hughes, that leads me to a question that Benson Ansell kind of posted in, and thinking about the power of parallel process and how supports such as consultants, early childhood educators, clinicians are trying to support that dyad, that relationship between that child and that parent. So his or her question was, how do you help parents use PACE with their kids instead of anger? Do you use PACE or a similar type of PACE with them? To impact that parallel process. So creating that space for them so that they then create that space for their child.
Oh my gosh, is that person a ringer? Were they in my training? Were they? Yeah, that's essentially how I would do it. So I'm working with a parent. At the end of the hour, I say, you seem to be pretty open and relaxed. Did you notice that I sort of related? I hope you didn't feel it as phony. It was genuine, I believe, that I was very curious about your experience. I was very accepting of your experience. I was very empathic about how hard it is for you. And once in a while, I was a little playful about this and that. And actually, that's the same way I want you to relate to your child. And next week, we'll meet again. And what we're going to do, actually, we're going to role play it a bit. I'll be you and you could be me. And then I'll be your child and you could be you interacting with your child who is me. And you'll get good at it. And so then we role play pace and we practice it. Yeah, I want the parent to experience it, not cognitively, but experientially.
I think that ties into a couple of the other questions about how you really help the parent, and then how you, I think from my aspect, it's not just helping the parent or the caregiver, but how do you help educators understand that a child may have attachment concerns, and these are things that you can do to help them without necessarily focusing on attachment. I don't know if I phrased that well, Dan.
Well, I think similar to what you were saying earlier, Dana, about if I could focus on the need on how important safety is for human learning. And the consensus the neurological consensus, the psychological consensus, I think the educational, the developmental, I mean, safety is just crucial for human learning. So then how do I sort of give that primacy in terms of importance? So how do I discipline while generating safety? As a therapist, really hard. How do I explore trauma safely? It's almost a contradiction in terms, but you have to be able to do it. And it takes skill and development to do it, but you need to be able to do it. But a teacher, the same way. How do I discipline the class? How do I frustrate a kid who doesn't want to? How do I be a parent who sets limits and do it in a way that generates safety, to separate the behavior from the child? And how do I keep safe myself? How do I address without shame the mistakes that I make as a parent or as a teacher? Boy, that's a big one, which means the teachers have to be safe and the parents have to be safe. I think PACE really sort of permeates it all. So the question, how do I convince people of that? Probably I'm trying to, try to do it experientially. I honor people's objections. I say, and parents will say, and sometimes teachers say, if I do it your way of chaos, and I'll say, well, if you have chaos, please don't do it. My sense is if you give it a try, maybe selectively, you might discover you don't have chaos, you get more cooperation. You might not, though. If you don't get cooperation, which I think you might get because you don't have as many power struggles. Power struggles tend to make everybody defensive and make you a little grumpier, actually. I hate to say it, but even teachers and parents can get grumpy, and therapists. Power struggles tend to make us and go into spaces. We do anything to win the battle, and then we're in trouble. So, but we don't want chaos. So I agree with you. We can't have chaos. So I would suggest we start in small steps around this issue, around this kid, and just see what happens and practice it. And we could role play. One of the best programs, this program I was involved with in Kansas, they have these parents, they made a couple of videos of parents who are really struggling with PACE and with sort of being able to because of their own histories. They were really challenged in their own histories. They had a lot of trauma growing up. So it activates you. When you're trying to work with a traumatized child and you've unresolved trauma yourself, it really is hard for a therapist, a teacher, or a parent. So anyway, these in this parent group, they spent some time looking at their own histories, but they also spent time role playing with each other, how to relate with their child with PACE. and they got good at it, and they would laugh and joke about it, and were very proud of themselves when the kid said something kind of nasty to them, and then they just got playful back, and then got curious about it, then had empathy about it, and accepted the child's experience that led to that behavior. I wish I could be more specific. You almost have to start experiencing it, trying it, practicing it, tinkering with it. It's hard to do it cognitively.
I know we only have a few minutes left, but can you say something briefly about nonverbals? There's a lot of questions in the question and answer about nonverbals, and if children are struggling with nonverbals, how do you use nonverbals to help them if they're not able to process them?
Oh, okay, that's a great question. And yeah, the kids who have had a lot of trauma tend not to look. And their ears are pretty hypervigilant, so the slightest frustration. So anyway, I'm going to exaggerate the nonverbals, like we do with babies. I will exaggerate it with a kid that it's and I'll keep my brain so that I'm not distracted by other stuff. I'm going to start the meeting with a kid a second before I meet him, because if he sees my eyes and he hears my voice, and it's a bit crossed over a phone call I just finished, I could waste the first 15 minutes because my voice and my eyes make him defensive. Has nothing to do with him, but it takes 1/10 of a second to process that when we've been traumatized, especially, but all of us, where we could put it aside if we haven't been traumatized, but we're likely to stick there if we've been traumatized. So I will prepare myself for it. I will, and then exaggerate it. And I'll let the kid know, totally accepting. The kid doesn't want eye contact. I'll notice that. He doesn't want eye contact. Hey, you're really interested in looking out the window when we chat. No worries about that. I am too. Then I might look out the window and tell him I'm looking at that tree over there. What are you looking at, by the way? Da, 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 da. And then the kid says, I'm an idiot. And I say, you are? You think I'm an idiot? What makes you think that? I actually think I'm pretty clever. Not about texting. I'm not very good at that. Would you be willing to teach me a little bit about texting? I'd actually be willing to teach you certain things that I know of. You know, you probably think I'm not interested in dinosaur things. Well, they're not all dinosaur things. Anyway, so I could play for the kids. I accept their silence. I say, gee, kid, it's great that you're showing me the quiet part of yourself. I bet you don't have a chance to do that very often. I'm good with that. So I guess my point is that if we relate in a typical teaching fashion with the nonverbals and a lecturing fashion, if we de-emphasize the nonverbals that many professionals are taught to do, where we're sort of more bland, more objective, we hide our experience. I show my experience, and I'm a professional and I'm trained to experience the kid under the symptoms, the kid who existed before the trauma. And I'm pretty good at seeing that, discovering who the kid is under the symptoms, who the kid is before he was traumatized. And then I relate to that kid that I experienced. Then it's so much easier not to react in a defensive and a challenging way. And then, and I could do that non-verbally. And my experience is that kids can pick up the nonverbal much faster than we think. Now, some might have a preference for visual, others have a preference for auditory. Well, I got to notice that. And then I emphasize the visual or the auditory. Or if you can't do visual at all, then I really emphasize the auditory. And I could baby steps toward the visual. I'll be very careful about touch. But he or she will probably experience me as being very attuned to their experience.
And along those lines, Dan, like Samuel Williams asked some questions that had to do with the other side of the nonverbals. When kids are expressing themselves nonverbally because they don't have the words and getting in a lot of trouble, how do we help systems and teachers and other adults understand the communicating value of their nonverbals? How do we understand what's going on with that child?
Yeah, well, I think one is training, one is recognizing it, one is practice with it, and another is helping the kid to be able to find the words. When I work with kids who don't have the words, which I do a lot, it's I make guesses and I wonder about it. And I talk about, it's really interesting how kids will listen to you and actually absorb the story you're developing when you talk about them. You look out the window and you say, John here is really struggling with the fact that he brought up his dad. And I'm not sure what it's about. He might be wanting to say, it's none of your effing business. My dad is my dad and you can keep him out of it. He might want to say, you think my dad is a bad man? Oh my goodness, if he thinks that, no wonder he wouldn't want to talk about his dad, because I don't think he's a bad man, but I'm worried that he might think that. So I have conversations with myself about the kid who's listening to me. By the end of that, often he has words for his relationship with his dad. Talking about a kid in front of them, always saying good things, of course. You're not saying bad things about the kid. You're saying good things about, you're making sense. When you talk about a kid and they don't have to answer, they don't have to prepare an answer, they listen so much better. They absorb, they sit there and stare and they absorb it because there's no pressure to answer. All they don't even have to listen. I'm just talking to myself.
And because you're using that curious tone, you're conveying that you're willing to be wrong. You're willing to have.
Oh gosh, yeah.
That's not it. Yeah.
Yeah. I never know what a kid is thinking. I guess what they might be thinking once in a while, some of the time a bit. And then they tell me if I'm full of crap, or they tell me that I get it right once a time a little bit. And I ask them for what percentage of the time am I right? And then we argue about it. I know, I think I'm right 17% of the time. No, you're not, you fool.
Well, looking at the time, we've reached 4 o'clock, and I want to sort of close things out. Want to say thank you to Dan for this presentation and the rich conversation. And I want to thank all of our guest panelists and our guest moderator for the day. If you have any questions about continuing education credits or certificate of attendance, please see inside the chat. I believe Nancy has been posting how you can get those continuing education credits in the certificate of attendance. Reminder for those seeking the continuing education credits, use the link in the email you received today. That should take you to a PDF with instructions for credits from UPMC. And for those who have been attending on Zoom, you'll be prompted after the meeting today and through an email tomorrow to participate in the brief survey about this presentation and download your certificate of attendance, which is separate from continuing education credits. Our next presentation will be Healing Racial Trauma, Racial Socialization as a Clinical Strategy for Black Youth by Rihanna Elise Anderson on Thursday, June 24th, 2021, starting at 2:30. And we will be sure to make sure that that is the correct start time. We look forward to having you join us. Thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.
I'd also like to say again, thank you to the Dr. Daniel Hughes for being with us today and for sharing your years of wisdom and for our great panel. And I will echo the thank yous that are just blasting through the chat, how much people have appreciated and learned and will take away from this. Thank you again. Thank you all.
And thank you all for being willing to be on the panel and for helping with this and for being responsive and listening and chatting and adding and talking.
Thank
Really
you.
a pleasure.
Oh, good. Yeah,
Thank you so much.
you're welcome. Good seeing you again, Karen.
Good to see you. Thanks for
Right.
doing this.
Oh, really happy to do it. I really a little bit discouraged with Nancy. I mean, okay, she did a little better with the doctor thing, but she kept calling me Daniel.
Oh, at least she didn't call you Danny.
That's not funny, Karen.
Oh.
That is not funny.
I'm feeling shamed, Dan.
As you should.
Oh, my